Good afternoon, everybody. As people are filing in, I just want to welcome you back to the last panel session before closing remarks. I think you're all incredibly wonderful to have been here all day long. And I'd like to, at a personal level, thank Dr. Asim Padel and Dr. Hassan Shanawani for me, this is quite a passion, the world of bioethics, and a very much long-awaited conference. So I'm very happy to be a part of it. My name is Najah Bazzy. I am a transcultural clinical nurse specialist. And again, I've been around the world of bioethics, and I don't call it end of life. I like to call it transitioning of life. So I would like to introduce our three panelists, and you'll be hearing from each one of them for approximately 20 minutes, and then we'll do the usual form. We'll go into the Q&A aspect. Dr. Andrew Barnosky is someone who I know, actually, I've done bioethics grand rounds with. He's an attending physician in the Department of Emergency Medicine at the University of Michigan Medical Center here, and an associate professor at the University of Michigan Medical School. In the College of Literature, Science, and the Arts, he is the director of the Health Sciences Scholars Program. For the University of Michigan Health System, he is the director of the Clinical Ethics Consultation Service. He serves as the chairperson of the Adult Medical Ethics Committee and is the director of the Medical School's Bioethics Grand Rounds program. He is a public health graduate of the Harvard School of Public Health and was recently a visiting clinical scholar in end-of-life care and palliative medicine at Churchill Hospital, University of Oxford Medical School, Oxford, England. So today he's going to be speaking to us about the Hospital Ethics Committee, its roles, and its processes. Without further ado, Dr. Barnosky.
You just advance it here. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. A couple months ago, Dr. Padella had asked if and he has served as a member of our ethics committee at the University of Michigan for the past couple years. He felt that in a conference such as this, it might be worthwhile to bring forward some of the work that we have done within our ethics committee at U of M. Our committee is probably like many of your committees in that we continue to try to seek out higher levels of quality and transparency and accountability, both to the patients and families that we serve, as well as members of our medical staff, et cetera, who request ethics consultation. And I would imagine that there's a number of you here who are either sit on ethics committees and or chair them, or have done so in the past, or may do so in the future, and if not, perhaps at least have an interest in knowing what it is that some of the people on the ethics committee do. So I've just got a few slides to go through, and probably will not need all of my 20 minutes that I'm given to get through this program, but simply to make you aware of some of the work that we have done in the event that some of it could be transportable to some of the programs that you have. I think everybody agrees that although there are a tremendous amount of bioethics conflicts and controversies, many that have been brought forward here today, that probably one thing that everybody can agree upon is that having an appropriate mechanism for adjudication and resolution, or at least coming to grips with some disputes, maybe not always answering all of the questions, but understanding why they're so hard, is always a worthwhile pursuit for everyone who's involved in this type of work. I would tell you that within our system, the way that we have structured our ethics consult is that we have members of the ethics committee who serve in terms of a consult team. And these are people who've been on the committee for a certain period of time and have grown within the discipline of clinical ethics to a point where we feel that their expertise is satisfactory to perform clinical ethics consultations. What we usually do is we have two of them who are paired. It's usually a physician or a nurse and a non-clinician. Part of the reason that this is structured this way is that we've always felt that although there are a wide variety of professionals who come to bioethics and ultimately are grassroots level bioethicists, that probably a physician is a good person to determine what care is due under some circumstances simply based on pathophysiology and natural course and history of various diseases. So we do have a clinician who is paired with a non-clinician from our committee, and I'll go through the committee membership here in just a couple minutes, and they serve as a team. So they carry a pager or have their pager assigned to our paging directory for 24/7 for a 2-week period. And we all do this. I mean, everyone who's a member of our committee does so, certainly out of a labor of love. There is no compensation, et cetera, for it, nor is there any revenue that is generated from the clinical ethics consultation process. And these two people are the ones who are on call for ethics consults, and when consults come, they both receive a page, and they will ultimately go to the floor, to the nursing unit, to meet with a patient, et cetera, family, to try to resolve the dispute if in fact that is possible, and if it's not possible, then we will meet in a traditional way with the committee of the whole in the way that many ethics committees meet otherwise. Now, our committee is composed of physicians as well as people in a wide variety of disciplines. Like most institutional ethics committees, probably about 40% of the membership on our committee is composed of doctors, of physicians. And they are in all of these disciplines presently that we have represented. We occasionally would like to have some disciplines represented that are not on here. Sometimes this is a bit of a catch-as-catch-can, the way that this comes together, but by the same token, we do have a great plurality of physicians who are able to view a large number of matters that arise within clinical ethics from their own areas of specialization and their own areas of expertise. And so these are the folks that we have who are our clinicians. Now, our non-clinicians, which comprise the majority of the ethics committee, are folks as noted here. We have a philosopher from Central Campus, academic ethicists. We have members of our hospital chaplaincy program. We have both practicing as well as non-practicing people, lawyers, folks who are schooled in law, social workers, an IRB or a member who is a representative, healthcare administrators. We have a community member at large, and we also have medical students. Our committee is an open committee, and certainly people who are a part of the University of Michigan community are certainly free to come. We do welcome our students to come as ad hoc members, as well as house officers and others who would have an interest in serving. We also do have 2 formal house officers who are chosen each year to serve as formal members of the committee. So, as I mentioned, this is simply a picture of our paging directory. And so for anyone who works within the University of Michigan health system, they have access to the paging directory, so that if I'm working in the emergency department and wanted to get a hold of a gastroenterologist, I mean, these paging directories allow you to see who's on call and who's on call for times of the day and who's on call for different specialties. And it took a while to get to this level, but the ethics committee and the ethics consultation process ultimately has its own page where someone could page for it. So if you go into this and click on that, it would immediately show you the 2 members of the committee who are on call. The paging number is immediately transferred to them, so it becomes fairly easy for people to request consults. Now, consults can be requested by anyone. They can be requested by the patient's family, by the patient themselves, by a nurse, by a medical student, by a house officer, by the attending physician, or anyone who feels that a consult is appropriate. And certainly if it's someone that does not have access to the paging directory, there are mechanisms in place where they can call the hospital operator, and this is the way that it's done. So that if we are on call for ethics consultation, we're notified about it at all during that period of time. What we generally do in terms of our process is that these 2 people who are assigned for ethics consultation will go to the individual who has requested the consultation and try to review all of the elements of care and to try to determine what is the reason by which the consultation has been requested. In many circumstances, because of the volume of consults that we have, it's not necessary to bring the entire committee together in person, but we are able to do that in a virtual sense based on the web-based methodology that we've utilized to do it. But under many circumstances, if the consult team is able to resolve the dilemma, or at least to frame it in an appropriate context for further dialogue, that they're able to prepare a consult in a Word document, and that it ultimately gets pasted into our ethics committee website, which is a password-protected secure site, at least that portion of it is. When that is done, immediately every single member of the committee receives an email notifying them that a consultation has been posted. And we have an implicit agreement amongst all of us that all people who are so notified would then go to the Ethics Committee webpage and read the consultation and comment on the consultation if they feel that it's appropriate to comment on it. So that provides a mechanism where, in terms of not trying to meld a bunch of schedules together, where everyone is able to at least weigh in on what the issue is in terms of the consultation. And of course, our consultations, as everybody here probably recognizes, is simply an advisory opinion to clarify the moral dilemmas or the moral dimensions of a particular issue that has arisen in the context of the doctor-patient relationship or in the patient-family medical team relationship. We do not in any way interfere with the elements of the doctor-patient relationship or medical management of any particular individual. It really is just to express, as ethics committees should only be for, an advisory opinion to those individuals who have requested it. So this is just a picture of our Ethics Committee website, which certainly anyone could go to, and I would encourage you here, if you're interested in seeing when our next Bioethics Grand Rounds is, or if anyone would like to read the ethics policies that we have, there's much on here which is available to anyone who would be interested going to it. Now, there is the area for consultations for Ethics Committee members, which is a password-protected area, but even in here, an individual could also go to the Ethics Committee webpage and request a consultation. These are just what happen for our members if you're going into it. Please conform to the following guidelines and recommendations. We're performing an ethics consultation, and this is the mechanism in which we ultimately post consults. Now, what happens is when someone ultimately does complete a consultation, the team does so, and it's put into our site, it ultimately appears like this, and these things are arranged chronologically so that the most recent one is the one which is on top. But it does allow someone to historically, if they were interested in doing so, peruse all of the consultations that were done, and certainly by clicking over on the right where it says Show Details, that would allow you to bring up the consult that was done. It shows who the primary consultants are, the members of the team. We have a tendency, at times it's difficult to do this, but to nonetheless categorize the type of consultations that we have, because certainly in some ethics consults, ultimately can be translated into traditional opportunities for improvement in either clinical process or asking people about advanced directives or things of that nature. So we do try to glean that information out of there if it's at all possible. So this is ultimately what one would get to if they were a member of the committee and we received a notification that a consultation had been posted. And when ultimately the consult is posted, it really just is posted in this box with the individual signs it, at the end, and this is what is allowed someone to read it. So that when a member goes into it, they actually view this. It shows the date when the consult is done, and this certainly is a HIPAA-compliant document here, as all of them are, but it gives the relevant history and then proceeds through in the way of any particular consultation. We always do make mention the fact that our ethics consultations are for an advisory opinion to notify those individuals who are reading the consultations afterwards of the nature of it, and then also try to frame what the ethical question that is being asked of the consultants is. So, all of the members would receive that. All of the members of the committee have the availability of reading that, and then they have the availability in a larger box that exists beneath it to basically weigh in on it. And so people will then go ahead and type their comments on it in the same way that people would add comments if you were having a true meeting. And these are just some examples of some comments which have been given on this particular case. And so what happens as a result of that is that the consultants who have performed it, we can all have a tendency of seeing, is everybody really aligned with the opinion that they have brought forward, or are there elements of controversy here for which we should call the committee as a whole together to try to tease out some of these elements further. And so this is the mechanism in which people will add in on this. And then, so when we look back on it, from the standpoint of the 4-year experience that we've had, we're able to segregate things into types of consults that have been done, and the number of member comments and so forth and trends in that regard. And so in our experience, within that period of time, of 112 consults total, and certainly when you're on call for ethics consultation at Michigan, you may get 2 consults within your 2-week period. There have been some circumstances where someone might receive 8, they may take greater or lesser amounts of time, as folks recognize. Futility, consent, competence, end of life, advanced directives, family disagreements, care conference, staff relations, and others. The other thing worthwhile pointing out is that, in many, many circumstances, when the ethics consult team becomes involved in this ultimately results in a family conference, and certainly in working through an ethics consultation, families and/or patients are certainly involved in that process as well. But many of the consults do involve a family meeting. Some may not, depending obviously if there are individuals available or individuals who are available who request to meet with the ethics consult team. And certainly to the extent that ethics consultation and probably ethical analysis, we have a tendency of viewing this as predominantly a secular discipline, but that's not to say that religious matters are not brought forward, because they are often brought forward, and certainly from the standpoint of either autonomy or whether you look at it in virtue ethics of respect for persons. I mean, these things often become very, very much paramount in integrating religious preferences of patients and families into consultation. This is just an analysis of some of the member comments that we've had. Many times there will be large numbers of folks who will weigh in on the committee. Many other times someone will just say, I'm firmly in agreement with everything you've done. It's been a difficult consult. Thank you, etc. So, and then these are just some trends that we have in terms of the consult topics as we look at it in a comparative sense from 2006 to 2010. There's not a great degree of variance of it, a little bit there. It probably requires a bit more of trending of this to see if we're having different things that are able to be fleshed out. So that's the nature of the experience at the University of Michigan, and thank you very much.
For those of you who maybe came in after we began, welcome again, and thank you on behalf of the entire committee for sticking it out here. I was telling the panelists earlier, since I'm usually not the moderator but the speaker, I'm not comfortable giving you a 2-minute card, so still please stick to your 20 minutes. And sure enough, so they say, ask and you shall receive, right? Again, this particular panel, as you can see in your pamphlet, deals with ethics in the healthcare system. So Professor James Jones is an associate professor of world religions with a concurrent appointment in the African Studies Department at Manhattanville College, New York. Professor Jones has been a volunteer prison chaplain since 1980 and now serves as a community-based mentor in cooperation with the Yale New Haven Hospital Clinical Pastoral Education Program. He is also the chair, tell me, one moment, because I just took my pencil off the paper. He is also chair of the board of Masjid al-Islam and has unpaid project director for the National Islamic Chaplaincy Endorsement Project for the last 4 years. Professor Jones holds a Master of Arts in Religion from the Yale Divinity School and a Doctor of Ministry from Hartford Seminary. Professor James Jones, please join us at the podium. Thank you.
Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalat wassalam ala rasulillah. After thanking the Creator and invoking blessings on Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, I'd like to thank the organizers for putting this together. I'm very honored to be here, and I'm particularly happy to see young Muslim professionals doing something that we tried to do in New Haven as well, that is, leveraging the institutions in which they're working or learning, working together for mutual benefit. I know Michigan, as Sophia and Chris and Annie told me, yesterday, is a public institution, and so this is not a religious engagement, but this is an intercultural engagement, which is of mutual benefit to the Muslim community and to the broader University of Michigan community. We ought to do more of this thing. I think one of our primary functions right now, given how Islam is seen in the United States of America, is infrastructure building. And this kind of meeting, wherein Muslims can come together and talk about what's important to them and also what's important to the broader community, is absolutely important. What happened to me here? Okay. So, I want to thank ISPU and the other organizations for putting this together. I want to also thank you, as you've been thanked before, because I'm wondering, trying to figure out which is worse, being the first speaker early in the morning, because a lot of us Muslims don't get there on time, or being next to the last speaker in the night, because some of us don't last to the end of the day, and you can see that maybe it's the latter. But at any rate, having said what I said about joint ventures, I want to emphasize that it's very important. One of the things I do, as it was pointed out, is that I'm in the African Studies Department. So this semester I'm teaching African American history and African American religions, and so African American music is on my mind. I know some Muslims are going, haram, 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 right? But anyway, one thing that comes to mind is a classic by a very important black singer. Mama may have, Papa may have, but God bless the child that's got his own. So no matter how many times we have these kind of institutions, and I'm going to be a little off topic because I think some of you are expecting me to talk about the role of the Muslim chaplain, I'm going to back up for a moment and talk about three things: agency, boundary management, and cultural competency that have to do with an elephant in the room we talked about before, is where we are in this particular place. So the first point, being a Muslim, the Quranic imperative, right? That we believe that our purpose is to worship the one God, and that our focus should be on the hereafter, and that it's often said in the Quran more than one time, are those who know equal to those who do not know. So knowledge is very, very important in Islam, and is just as important in the situation of the role of the chaplain in the hospital situation. But if you look at the current and particular role of the Muslim chaplain, some points I made in my abstract is, number one, we're newcomers. I mean, we are the new kids on the block. And secondly, that we are about compassionate care as well. And it seems to me that the kinds of ethics teams that the doctor talked about, at some point we should be a voice there, but we're not there yet. And finally, if we look at a couple of documents that are out there on the internet, one is the ISPU document by Dr. Abu Ras, I believe, in November 2010, and the CARE pamphlet put out by the Council on American Islamic Relations. I happen to be on the national board for medical professionals. You'll see that Muslims are thinking about this issue and beginning to work. But if we take a look at the issue of agency, first of all, in defining it, agency means something that's intentional, voluntary, and self-directed in terms of action. But when we look at where we are in chaplaincy in the Muslim community, we find that it's disorganized, ad hoc, and reactionary action. That's our situation. That the reality is that we don't get to the bedside of people except that when we're called. We don't think about it in advance. I mean, there may be some communities that do, but most of the communities I know, when it comes to hospital chaplaincy, don't have any kind of organization. I'm talking about voluntary or non-voluntary, and that when we come in, usually it's an emergency. Somebody's about to die, and they've been in the hospital for quite some while. We have to be brought up to speed, and we are often reacting to a situation that someone else has engineered. Rather than being at the beginning of the ethics consult, we're usually there maybe the last 20 seconds of a person's life, and you don't get to do much consultation at that particular point. And so agency is a major issue for us, And if we understand that, one of the reasons that why we don't have this kind of agency is the big no. We have no educational system for training persons who lead Islamic service in public institutions, and we have no entity that sets standards for competencies. These are two very, very important issues. To comment on the first point, let me quote from a book that was published in 2010. The author says, "Therefore, and without debate, America needs an Islamic seminary, a real one, a big one, a powerful one which demands and receives the admiration and affirmation of Muslim scholars around the world. A little storefront training school here and there will not only will not do, but will constitute a point of embarrassment and discredit to Islam in America." This is a statement that was made by a non-Muslim. We would expect it to come from a Muslim. And this is it's in a book called, it's John Morgan, who's the president of the Graduate Theological Foundation in Indiana. Sunni Ali let me borrow his. You can get this free by going to Graduate Theological Foundation website, and it's a study on Muslim clergy from a particular country. These are immigrant Muslim clergy. It's a sociological study on immigrant Muslim clergy in America. And Dr. Morgan's primary thesis here is that unless Muslims professionalize their imamship, right? And by professionalize, he means educate and set standards for, that we're not going to be affirmed, confirmed, or accepted in American society. Because the reality, the kind of intercultural exchange that needs to go on by people who are authorized by the community, by the Muslim community, and also affirmed by the outside community. And that affirmation, that two-way affirmation, comes from setting your own agenda in terms of education and certification. And this is a very, very important point to understand. I would argue that until we get busy about this fact, it's going to be very difficult for Muslim chaplains to play a major role in healthcare, because the reality is going to be ad hoc. It's going to be, so you'll find somebody. I happen to live in New Haven. I happen to have gone to Yale Divinity School and Harvard Seminary, and people call me and they know me through the network. But this is not the situation. This is an ad hoc situation that we need to develop our own institutions for affirming who we are in the American society. So if we look at the study I referenced a few moments ago, Dr. Abu Ras makes the point that training of Muslim chaplains to meet the needs of Muslim patients will need to account for the ways that Muslim religious leadership differs from Christians and Jewish models, as well as the internal diversity of the Muslim American communities. Furthermore, developing Islamic chaplaincy core competencies should include a basic knowledge of bioethics. She knew about this conference in advance, as many Islamic chaplains serve as cultural brokers in the hospital settings. If you put Dr. Abu Ras and you put Dr. Morgan together, you get the point that, translation, do not clone Christian or overseas seminaries. That's not the answer. And there are several reasons why it's not the answer. It's just because we do view clergy a little different than the Jews and the Christians. On top of it, having done some literature study as part of this larger project, when you do the literature study, you see that the model of Christian seminary, and I'm a graduate of 2 Christian seminaries, is still contested. Because Christian seminaries are relatively new in the United States. And so the model of what's the most effective Christian seminary, and so we should be careful not to clone them, no disrespect to them, but they're still debating about emphases in different areas. And the reality is context, context, context. That if we bring Al-Azhar here to Michigan, it's going to be a little bit of a problem, because the world in Egypt, having gone there for the past 6 years, my wife and I run a language training program, Arabic training program in Cairo for the past 6 years. It's a very different world from Ann Arbor. Trust me on that one if you've never been there. And so we're not talking about cloning Christian or overseas seminaries. Okay. What happened? Okay. So the other issue is endorsement. Just quickly, because some of us might not know because it's not the area that some of you know, endorsement is a process whereby a faith tradition certifies to the outside world that a person has the attitudes, competencies, and support system to deliver services in public institutions in the name of that faith tradition. Attitudes and competencies we get, right? Attitudes. Everybody who's Christian cannot be a Christian chaplain. Everybody who's Jewish cannot be a Jewish chaplain. Everybody who's Muslim cannot be a Muslim chaplain. They might be a very good Muslim, but if they believe La ilaha illallah is the beginning and the end, they're usually not a good person for an interfaith team, which is what happens in a hospital setting, because they feel that, you know, if you don't believe that Muhammad is the messenger, you're going to hell, and that's the end of the conversation, and this is not the kind of person who needs to work on it. Plus, you need to provide a support system for the people who are in chaplaincy. Okay, so let me just say as an aside and quickly move on. So I think a major task for Muslims in chaplaincy, as I feel in other areas, is infrastructure building. And that means assessing the needs in the area, that is building consensus for actions, collaborating with those who are already doing what needs to be done, developing needing institutions, and evaluating continuously. Okay. All right, so that was agency. Boundary management. There's some boundaries that we need to be attentive to, even in this ad hoc situations. I just chose a couple of boundary management clashes that you might see. One is between the visible and the invisible Muslims. The CARE pamphlet really deals with the visible Muslims, because CARE, I was talking with Sister Asma a few minutes, is a very visible national organization, and the CARE line is the normative Muslim Sunni line that you tend to get. When they put a pamphlet together, they're really talking about normative Islam. The problem is what we call folk Islam on the ground is not like normative Islam. That's in the real world. Ihsan Bagby, another colleague of mine, who's done another number of studies on mosque in America, he's doing one right now, says that most of the people, about 70% of the Muslims in this country, don't go to the mosque. And so therefore they don't fit into that normative mold. And so really, when you read these pamphlets, Morgan makes this point in his book, they're a good starting point for you, but understand that this is normative Islam, and I'm keep bumping against this computer and making trouble for myself. You understand that this is normative Islam. Somebody give me a hand here. If you understand this is normative Islam, and it's not the Islam of the people, what they do from day to day. Okay, I can find it. Yeah. Thank you. So you need to understand that point. The second, there are Muslims who don't fit into those categories, who don't pray 5 times a day, who don't go to the masjid, maybe come Ramadan or Eid, just like they're Christmas Christians and Yom Kippur Jews. So we're no different in that particular regard. And Leonard, in her book, The Muslims in America, makes that point. And then the whole difference between what's a religious issue, and there are people who are much more qualified than I am to talk about the difference between religious and clinical issues. The reality for most Muslim leadership, that is religious leadership, they don't have a clue about clinical issues, not a clue. I mean, we are in New Haven, we've started an aggressive program of getting Muslim leaders to go into clinical pastoral educational programs for that reason. But most of the people in leadership that I know, and I work with a lot of them since I'm the chair of the board, and so I meet with them, if you start talking about ethics in the hospital setting and bioethics, they would not have a clue. And so that's some internal work that we need to do as Muslims. The final point, cultural competency, Dr. Abu Ras makes this point, that actually one of the major jobs for the Muslim chaplain right now in New York, she did the study in New York, right now is educating the people in the hospital about Islam, right? I would say both the visible and the invisible Muslims need to educate. But this is a cultural interchange. As I pointed out, that there needs to be educational programs that come from the healthcare systems to the Muslim community about the culture of the healthcare system and how to navigate that culture. And this is above and beyond the chaplaincies, because you want your imams to have some understanding of what needs to be done in terms of navigating the healthcare system. So this is all I want to say about this. We usually close many of our what we say by reading a short chapter of the Quran. I think it'll be okay, even though this is in a state-supported institution. But it gives a bit of our orientation. While us, by the token of time, surely human beings in loss, except those who have faith and do righteous deeds and join together in the mutual teaching of truth and the mutual and of patience and constancy. Thank you for being patient with me while we talk for a few moments. Assalamu alaikum.
Is this your cell phone? Continuing on, and by the way, I also want to say it's such an honor and pleasure in the world of bioethics to have Dr. Howard Brody, Dr. Lynn Weber, and others here with us, such prominence at this conference today. It's just so rich. The next speaker is going to be speaking to us about advocating for Muslim needs to healthcare systems. And it really is an honor for me to introduce this person who has been almost a lifelong partner in much of the work that has happened in the Detroit Dearborn community. Hajj Eide Alawan serves as a diversity liaison for the Detroit Medical Center, Harper Hospital, and the Women's Hospital of the Detroit, and the Women's Hospital of the Detroit Medical Center. So basically Harper Hutzel, for those of you who are from this area. He has extensive experience as a patient advocate, spiritual support representative, patient confidant, does much work in interfaith group counseling, ethnic, and diversity liaison, and motivational guide for the patient health benefits recovery. He advises the DMC on patient-physician communication skills and improving hospital sensitivity to and the ability to work with people of all faiths, ethnic traditions, and racial backgrounds. I think that is one of Eide's strongest components of his personality, is the ability to just fluidly move through population upon population. Mr. Alawan also serves on the Ethics Committee of Oakwood Hospital in Dearborn, Children's Hospital at the Detroit Medical Center, and the Detroit. And I'm double reading because it's printed twice, forgive me. He serves as the Intra and Interfaith Outreach Officer of the Islamic Center of America, located in Dearborn, Michigan, and is the liaison to Imam Sayyid Hassan Kazwini, who was here earlier today at the Islamic Center of America. Without further ado, Eide Alawan.
Assalamu alaikum. Peace be with you. She said everything I was going to say. I've been blessed in the last few years to be able to serve on three ethics committees. And most of my involvement has been advising on Muslim, both Shia and Sunni traditions. As a sushi, I think most of you have not heard what a sushi is, but I want to tell you what a sushi is. Sushi is a Muslim that has a respect for all schools of thought. We are starting this in this country so that we can become the Muslims that I think Allah or God wants us to be. I deal with people that are both of Sunni and Shia tradition. I make sure that they're accommodated in all their needs, whether dietary needs, religious needs, or whatever it may be. One of the problems I do see, Professor Jones was saying, I do also practice being chaplain at the hospital because we don't have a Muslim chaplain. And I also sometimes have to be a chaplain to a Christian family, which I do my best in every way possible to comfort them and ease them with the pain that they are going through. Now, as a Muslim sushi, the promotion, what we're trying to do is to get people to understand we need to come together in all the professions. And unless we do that, the hospitals are not going to understand what Islam is. One of the problems I find within hospitals is some of the Muslims will refer to halal or kosher product, but they will not consider the kosherness to the Muslim that needs the explanation of the kosher that they handle. And what I would like to ask Muslim doctors and professionals that are in the hospital is let's come together and understand what the halal menu should be for hospitals. I'm going through a trial situation right now with DMC, is that they don't understand how important the halal menu is to a Muslim. I think Muslims have to be just as well accommodated to as Jews and Christians. Having a tuna fish sandwich for breakfast or for lunch and dinner is not satisfactory to me. I think that the patient deserves the same consideration that other people within the hospital do. The other thing is to get the hospitals to understand in traditions the fact of our traditions. Now, we have traditions not only in the Muslim traditions, but we have tradition in the ethnic backgrounds. And this is what I do the best at the hospital, is try to train them in that area. Muslims, non-Muslims need to know at the time of death which direction is Mecca. And this is I think the University of Michigan here is doing it because they have a designation on the wall showing the Kaaba, and that's the direction in which a person is to be oriented towards the end of their life. But I have to mention one of the big things right now is that there's a pride that we have in our community, Professor Jones, is that we are starting a chaplaincy program here, and it's by CIOM, the Council of Islamic Organizations of Michigan. It's going to be done at ETS, the Economical, I'll get it out, Ethical Seminary of the City of Detroit. And Imam El Turk, would you stand up, please? He is the imam that designed the chaplaincy program and will be conducting the program at ETS beginning in September. So we need to promote this. We have the opportunity. He's developed a program that is going to be in conjunction with the ETS program here in Detroit. It's a 2-year program. So if you have youth in your community, or not youth, but people in general, that want to take these classes to become a chaplain, which is, believe me, highly needed. I am not a chaplain, although I serve as a chaplain, as Muslim chaplain throughout the 3 hospitals I deal with. We need a real chaplain. The best thing I can say is that professionals, we need to come together. We need Muslims to come together and form at hospitals so that we can give the best care to the patients, as well as understanding to the families that come in. That's one of the most difficult things right now, is sometimes that the professional Muslims are on different pages on how to understand a tradition, religious tradition, and an ethnic tradition. Thank you very much for the opportunity, folks.
Well, gee, I simply said, try not to go over your 20 minutes so I don't have to give you a 2-minute card, because that would embarrass me. But I didn't expect you to go less than 20 minutes. So now the burden is on all of us to ask these wonderful 3 panelists some burning questions. And I think we can open it up. Doesn't necessarily have to be specifically to the absolute roles that we have listed here, but maybe you have just some questions in general that one of the 3 might be able to take. And if not, then I'm going to start shooting questions. And that's not something you want to do, because I may also end up answering some of those questions myself, because I can't help it. So please feel free to take the microphone and begin asking your questions. Thank you, gentlemen, all 3 of you. Thank you very much. Well, we will begin from the right, as is the sunnah.
Hi, Molly, go ahead.
Okay, so going by the sunnah. Sure. Okay, I'm actually going to stick to the topics, and I'm going to ask Dr. Jones and Dr. Barnosky each separate questions. So, Dr. Jones, say one of these young doctors are inspired, they're inspired by your talk, and they raise $50 million for you to start your own Islamic seminary to train chaplains, and you can design the seminary as you like. What do you imagine the Islamic chaplain's role will be in bioethics? I mean, we heard from the conference this tension of, what should the doctor's responsibility be? What should be the Islamic scholar's responsibility? And a lot of Islamic chaplains currently kind of push back and they say, we're not scholars, we're not even imams, and so we're not religious authorities. So there's kind of a resistance of the current Islamic chaplains to provide fatwas or even recommendations in terms of what does Islam have to say about various bioethical issues. For an Islamic hospital chaplain, what could you imagine your role would be for in terms of bioethics when you consult? That's my question for Dr. Jones. For Dr. Barnosky, along the same kind of lines of my grandiosity, if we were to imagine a kind of Islamic work group that wanted to provide bioethic recommendations online, I mean, what are the kind of legal, or in other words, there's a work group, let's say, based in the University of Chicago, that they provide a service for people who, at University of Michigan, you have a Muslim patient, you don't know the bioethics question. Can you imagine an online service from distantly, for like a work group for Islamic bioethics? Are there kind of barriers to that, legal barriers? Or since ethical recommendations are non-binding, are there restrictions, or is that something that could be feasible? Kind of an online bioethics, Islamic bioethics work group that can give recommendations to ethical committees? Thank you.
So why don't we take the first question?
Sure. I would think a Muslim chaplain has three roles. As I saw it in the prison, because most of my experience has been in the prison, I've just begun to work in the hospital setting and mainly as a clinical supervisor. One is presence. You just by being there, and I know this seems too obvious, but reflecting the kind of more interfaith and accepting. I mean, because the problem is that we have a PR problem in the United States of America, and that, like it or not, when we go into institutions and when people see us, particularly if we dress differently, as some of us do, people have some notions about who we are. And I think that we need to go overboard with the being good to neighbors thing. When somebody greets you with a better word. I mean, I think that's extremely important, that we make it clear that we're part of the team, we're going to be present there. The second Islamic paradigm, that is, and this is the educational part, is that helping people understand how Islamic principles play out in terms of compassionate care. I mean, again, this is something that people almost never hear about when it comes to Islam. And so in the short run, what the chaplain is going to be in a teaching role. The third is advocacy when that time comes, when a patient cannot get the food that they need, or they feel like their modesty, and modesty is a big thing for Muslims. There's an authentic tradition of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that all religions have their characteristics, and the characteristics of Islam is modesty. Well, it's very difficult to be modest when you have one of these gowns on and your back is out, but people still try. Men and women, people think it's only women, but men and women have this issue. And so my point about this is that you need to be able to do those three things aside from offer pastoral care. I mean, because people are going to be looking for pastoral care. And in the area of bioethics, I think it's the second that I outlined as most important. That is, and we're just beginning to do this. I mean, we have people who are writing about this, writing books about this. We need to bring it to the ground level. That is, intellectuals are talking about it, but the average Muslim doesn't know a lot of the writing that's available, and it needs to be translated into everyday language because the doctors don't have time to read the books and the papers. And so those are the things I think would a Muslim chaplain would need to do.
Thank you. The question regarding would a Muslim-based online internet advocacy ethics consult partner be valuable? I think someone would have to look at that and say, well, certainly it would be valuable. But I think in some circumstances, it's very much like a telephone interpreter service in the emergency department. Would you rather have a telephone interpreter services, or would you rather have an interpreter? And I think under all circumstances, you would much rather have an interpreter. I think one of the things that was brought out very well this morning is that there is truly a very diverse plurality of traditions, beliefs, and practices within the Muslim community. And to the extent that one would rely on someone who cannot necessarily interact with the patient, there certainly could be differences of opinion, I would imagine, depending on who one might have a tendency of interacting with. You know, in this particular type of environment geographically, I mean, I think that we are all in this together from the standpoint of caring for other human beings. Whether one is a physician or whether one is in the clergy, or different roles that people have that come forward in dealing with patients in pain, patients involving end of life, whether one approaches it from the medical side, the nursing side, the palliative care side, the ethics side, or the clergy spirituality side. You know, it would be good if we could come together in this regard. And, you know, there's no question that when one is trying to work through issues involving diverse cultures, that having someone who can serve as an effective cultural broker is extremely valuable. But oftentimes, in spite of the best efforts of people providing care, it's hard to identify them, and it's hard to seek them out. And, you know, it would be really worthwhile, I think, if people who have this skill set and a willingness to serve out of simply a passion for the work that's being done could notify healthcare institutions and tell them that if you're ever involved in this particular type of situation, I am willing to help. And then I think that, you know, some of these aspects could be addressed far more appropriately. We have a chaplaincy service at the University of Michigan that has 5 chaplains. They're of different faiths, and I think it's impossible to certainly cover every faith and every sect of every faith through an institutional chaplaincy program. It requires a large number of people. I think that type of a system would be really worthwhile as it was described, but I think it would be second best to some of the things that we could do if we really put our minds to it.
Thank you all for your presentations. A couple of questions, Dr. Barnosky. Just a point of clarification, I wasn't sure that the system that you have set up at University of Michigan, if that information is available for public consumption, and if for public to access, or for others outside of the university system to access and benefit from it, and if so, what are some of the pitfalls, such as privacy issues and so on and so forth, beyond HIPAA? One other point of question regarding what Dr. Jones mentioned, and Mr. Alawan, if you can chime into it as well. You rightly pointed out that one size does not fit all. You have Muslims that are more secular inclination, and certainly those who are more religiously inclined. Nevertheless, when you are advising, Mr. Alawan, for example, if you're advising a patient on a certain issue, medical issue, your precepts are all informed by your Islamic ethical considerations, though they are necessarily universal and the same vis-a-vis organ transplantation or brain death issues. So if you have any comments on that, I'd appreciate your outlook on that. Thank you.
My question is probably the easier of the two and the quicker to answer, and that is that most of the things on the webpage that we have for the Ethics Committee are accessible, but not the consults. So if someone wanted to go get our policies regarding withholding, withdrawal of care, feudal care, and those types of things, those are all available and could be, you know, utilized by other institutions if they chose to do so, or for educational reasons, et cetera. When our consults are done, they ultimately become part of CareWeb, which here is the electronic medical record at the University of Michigan, and it would be listed as an ethics consultation. So it would be in the same way as one would scrolling through and find a GI consultation or a neurology consultation, a history and physical and discharge summary, et cetera. Those things would be visible for anyone who was involved in providing care. And certainly if someone were to scroll through the record on a second or third admission and found out that an ethics consult was done at that point in time, it would be visible. But it would really be visible in the same way that any other type of consultation or elements of the protected medical record would be visible to people who have an interest to know. So.
I think the problem is that when I talk to people, most of the time when I talk to people in the hospital, they're not asking me ethical questions. They want to be, they want to find somebody Muslim to talk to, right? So they're looking for pastoral care. When they do, it's not a big problem in the sense that if it's something very simple, I answer. If it's generally understood, I answer it. If it's not, I'll tell them, and I try to get back to people in a 24-hour cycle. Let me just add something else. I think that in this day and age, if you're in the healthcare system, you're on the staff as a doctor or a nurse or a personal care assistant, that I think you have an obligation to do some of the things that need to be done in the absence of a chaplain. Let me give you an extreme example of it. Dr. Izzeldin Abuleish, who's from Gaza, released a book called I Shall Not Hate in January of this year. I happen to know him. I've known him for about 5 or 6 years. Some of you who follow the news know that during the Gaza incursion, literally he got on national Israeli TV after his daughters and his niece were killed in his apartment, and it's all over. I mean, this is a guy who doesn't go around talking about Islam all the time. But if you read his book, I Shall Not Hate, you'll understand that Islam informs what he teaches his daughters. I mean, it doesn't seem appropriate here, except in the sense that in the United States right now, Islam is under siege in the public square. And so for some of us, it'll be easy for us to go underground, as it were. Those of us who are not clearly identified, who don't wear, something like this or wear hijab. I mean, but I think that we have an obligation, given the kind of situation that we find ourselves in, when we're on the staff of an institution such as a healthcare institution, to do some of the things that I talked about, that is to be present as a Muslim and to exude, not to I'm a Muslim, I'm doing because oftentimes people say, well, why do you do that? Why are you so nice to people? This is what Muslims do. I mean, I've had this situation at work, and also you end up educating people as well, because people need to be educated. I'm not paid to do this kind of job. So I want to say that, in terms of bioethical issues, I have enough people in New Haven that are in the medical profession, like Dr. Mata, or people who are much more knowledgeable than me in Islam, that I can access for that. And so within 24 hours, I can get a consult for that. I think the bigger issue is for us making sure that we have a positive presence in that institution, because to the extent that we on the staff, make positive contributions to the institution, it will be better for the patient. Do you follow me? In other words, if we're seen as valuable, it will help the patients.
I'd like to thank all the panelists and Najah for moderating this session. I just graduated from medical school, and one of the feedbacks I just was wondering if I could have any of the panelists' recommendations regarding was, more of this agency, as you were mentioning, Professor Jones, taking proactive measures to accommodate patients in the healthcare setting. And one thing that I noticed that was very basic, that was lacking, was simply to, recognize that should I be having a Muslim patient in the hospital, that taking certain kind of proactive measures would be very beneficial, such as possibly, asking if they would like to have a prayer timetable, or indicating the direction of the prayer. I mean, basic measures such as that would definitely go a long way in accommodating patients, and I find that hospitals have been exceptionally accommodating, but I've seen almost an absence of Muslim chaplaincy presence, maybe, or Muslim presence, period, in maybe filling in those gaps. I'm wondering, why not more of a proactive measure? And one place where this could come in, for example, is if patients are registering. I know most hospitals ask for patient religion, and sometimes we ignore that. And this is possibly where a follow-up question could be addressed is, would you like supplemental information pertaining to your religion, whether you're Christian, Jewish, or Muslim? And that would accordingly imply, if you're Muslim, prayer direction, prayer carpet, times of prayers. I think this applies to a vast number of patients in the hospital setting who might not necessarily be end of life, but who would still feel much better accommodated. If you could all comment, or whosoever would like. Thank you.
One moment, please. So we're coming down to the last 4 minutes of this panel, and I'm all about the voice. So I'm going to ask you three to keep your very brief. We'll hear the two of you be very brief, ask questions, and then let them respond, and we're going to tie up the session. So 4 minutes for all. Thank you.
You know, I think it's very important that all the things that the doctor mentioned be there. As I said, I understand the University of Michigan has the direction of Mecca already designated. Prayer schedules are very important. I do pass those out. I don't know about the prayer rugs because most of the patients are bedridden. But direction of Mecca and prayer schedule are very definite. We need the doctors also to get the nurses to understand these things are needed, because sometimes the hospital administration doesn't see the need of it. They figure there's only 1, 2 Muslims in there. But when it comes time of death, the nurse needs to know what direction to help the family turn that bed and why they're doing it.
Just very quickly, I mean, I think that there's more and more which is being done in undergraduate medical education in terms of the concept of taking a spiritual history as part of doing a history and physical examination. The degree to which that has penetrance into students and faculty and physicians in training alike remains to be seen, but it seems that it becomes more and more a part of the culture. I think the bigger question is that if you do that and you do identify that there are religious needs within the patients that you're serving, is the institution, from the standpoint of having people willing to take the baton from you once you identify needs, willing to come forward? Will there be Muslim chaplains and other individuals in different religious groups who can ultimately fill that need?
I just would add, I don't think it's the doctor's role. You might not be implying that to ask these questions for obvious reasons. I think the Muslim doctor can help in peer-to-peer relationship, that is with the staff, and consulting and supporting. But I think for obvious reasons, I don't think, as a professor, I have students who identify as Muslims whose practice spans the spectrum, and I don't think it's my role to ask them or offer, because I think it gets into a tricky, professional area. But with my peers, I do. That is, the other people on staff and student activities that like that.
So we'll do one moment and one moment, and so, please.
Thank you very much, Steve Modell, School of Public Health. What percentage of the consultation cases revolve around explicitly religious issues? And since it is a public university, how are these wrestled with?
It's actually a minority, I think. I mean, from the standpoint of explicit requests or preferences which are brought forward in the consults that we have done. And yet, when issues are brought forward in that regard, I think that, those requests are accommodated. I mean, certainly from the standpoint of honoring patients' preferences in terms of patient autonomy, one necessarily tries to do that. That may at times involve enlisting members of the clergy and sometimes not. But then again, I think that our religion and our sense of spirituality drives many things, and particularly can drive many things near the end of life, even though it may not be brought out or categorized as such, that it can be, something which nonetheless is driving requests. But from explicitly, I would say it's a minority. Yeah.
Yes. When the patient's admitted in the intensive care, and oftentimes with the coma, cardiac arrest, respirator, the family is looking for some comfort, yes, but at the same time, they are really asking more of a religious advice and guidelines. Where do we go? Especially the terminally ill. And at the same time, the transplant team is hounding them with indirect suggestion, well, this is futile, it's not going to do. I've been confronted with this situation many times. Patient's family has called, this is the situation, this is what the neurologists say, this is what the cardiologists say, what do we do? So we withdraw that. So the chaplaincy who is going to be trained in things is not just only a comfort thing, they must learn the fundamental working knowledge of cardiology, pulmonology, and the neurology in the terminal aspect of that. Because if they don't have, so that they can understand the language when they are being told, this is the situation, and you give us advice. Because patients' family, especially the Muslims, are not looking just for comfort. They're looking some religious advice. Should I go along with what the doctor is suggesting? And the doctors are suggesting what the hospital policies are. As you know, the standard of care in many good university centers are, if the transplant team can produce 75% of patients for the transplant, is considered a good center. So my suggestion is that the chaplaincy program should consider these, which you call the critical care, turning into the donor care, which is wrong.
Thank you all, gentlemen. Do you have a comment?
Yeah. Actually, this is done, ACPE, they have a training program, they have a residency program, and there's a didactic portion that includes introduction to the culture of the hospital. In certain departments of the hospital, you do rounds like a physician does. And so if a person is formally trained through ACPE, he or she will get the basics and will understand the language of what a doctor is talking about. But inshallah, we'll get there soon.
I just wanted to make one closing comment based on the last question. I think it's important. You know, ethics committees and I think ethics consultation traditionally has also carried part of the weight of palliative care. And I think as palliative care continues to grow in the United States, we have a palliative care consultation service at the University of Michigan. When that first came about, we had a big drop in the number of ethics consults that we did. And part of the reason is that we were doing, a lot of times an ethics committee would be called when what was really needed was that someone was interested in having some guidance from going to aggressive models of care to more of palliative models of care. It's not really an ethical question per se, but you know, someone who would be involved in this work could nonetheless facilitate some of the elements of discussions and working with families and so forth. And so I think the question of, you know, the University of Michigan being a public university and how does one cater to the religious needs of patients at this point in time probably is, it certainly is something that is dealt with in ethics consultation, but it's dealt with in a very large part, I think, in palliative care and palliative care consultation, which is something that continues to evolve as palliative care has an increasing presence in American medicine.